Chapter 17 of The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. The Trail of the Lonesome Pine by John Fox, Jr. Chapter 17. Twice her lips opened soundlessly, and dazed, she could only point dumbly. The old stepmother laughed. "Jack Hale done that. He pestered yo' pap to let him do it for ye, and anything Jack Hale wants from yo' pap, he gets. I thought it was plumb foolishness, but he's got things to eat planted thar, too, and I declare it's right purty." That wonderful garden! June started for it on a run. There was a broad grass walk down through the middle of it, and there were narrow grass walks running sideways, just as they did in the gardens which Hale told her he had seen in the outer world. The flowers were planted in raised beds, and all the ones that she had learned to know and love at the Gap were there, and many more besides, the hollyhocks, bachelor's buttons, and marigolds she had known all her life, the lilacs, touch-me-nots, tulips, and narcissus she had learned to know in gardens at the Gap. 2 rose bushes were in bloom, and there were strange grasses and plants and flowers that Jack would tell her about when he came. One side was sentineled with sunflowers, and another side by transplanted laurel and rhododendron shrubs, and hidden in the plant and flower bordered squares were the vegetables that won her stepmother's tolerance of Hale's plan. Through and through June walked, her dark eyes flashing joyously here and there when they were not a little dimmed with tears, with Loretta following her, unsympathetic in appreciation, wondering that June should be making such a fuss about a lot of flowers, but envious withal when she half guessed the reason, and impatient Bud eager to show her other births and changes. And over all the while June was whispering to herself, "My garden, my garden." When she came back to the porch after a tour through all that was new or had changed, Dave had brought his horse and Loretta's to the gate. No, he wouldn't come in and rest a spell. "They must be getting along home," he said shortly, and old Judd Tolliver insisted that he should stay to dinner, and Dave tied the horses to the fence and walked to the porch, not lifting his eyes to June. Straightway the girl went into the house to help her stepmother with dinner, but the old woman told her she reckoned she needn't startin' yet, adding in a querulous tone June knew so well, "I've been mighty poorly, and there'll be a mighty lot for you to do now." So, with this direful prophecy in her ears, the girl hesitated. The old woman looked at her closely. "You ain't a bit changed," she said. They were the words Loretta had used, and in the voice of each was the same strange tone of disappointment. June wondered, were they sorry she had not come back, putting on airs and fussed up with ribbons and feathers, that they might hear her picked to pieces and perhaps do some of the picking themselves? Not Loretta, surely, but the old stepmother? June left the kitchen and sat down just inside the door. The Red Fox and 2 other men had sauntered up from the store, and all were listening to his quavering chat. "I seed a vision last night, and there's trouble a-comin' in these mountains. The Lord told me so straight from the clouds. These railroads and coal miners is a-goin' to raise taxes, so that a poor man will have to sell his hogs and his corn to pay 'em, and have nothin' left to keep him from starvin' to death. Them police fellers over there at the Gap is a-stirrin' up strife and a-runnin' things over there as though the earth was made for them, and the citizens ain't goin' to stand for it. And this war's a-comin', and on there'll be shootin' and killin' over there and over here. I seed all this devilment in a vision last night, as sure as I'm sittin' here." Old Judd grunted, shifted his huge shoulders, parted his mustache and beard with 2 fingers, and spat through them. "Well, I reckon you didn't see no devilment, Red, that you won't take a hand in, if it comes." The other men laughed, but the Red Fox looked meek and lowly. "I'm a servant of the Lord. He says do this, and I does it the best I know how. I goes about a-preachin' the word in the wilderness, and a-healin' the sick with soothin' yarbs and such." "And makin' compacts with the devil," said old Judd shortly, "when the eye of man is a-lookin' the other way." The left side of the Red Fox's face twitched in the faintest shadow of a snarl, but shaking his head, he kept still. "Well," said Sam Barth, who was thin and long and sandy, "I don't care what them fellers do on t'other side of the mountain, but what air they comin' over here for?" Old Judd spoke again. "Give you a job, if you wasn't too dern lazy to work." "Yeah," said the other man, who was dark, swarthy, and whose black eyebrows met across the bridge of his nose, "that damned Hale who's tearin' up hell fire here in the cove." The old man lifted his eyes. Young Dave's face wore a sudden malignant sympathy which made June clench her hands a little more tightly. "What about him? You must have been over to the Gap lately, like Dave thar. Did you git board in the calaboose?" It was a random thrust, but it was accurate, and it went home, and there was silence for a while. Presently old Judd went on: "Taxes hain't goin' to be raised, and if they are, folks will be better able to pay 'em. Them police fellers at the Gap don't bother nobody if he behaves himself. This war will start when it does start, and as for Hale, he's as square and as clever a fellow as I've ever seed. His word is just as good as his bond. I'm a goin' to sell him this land. It'll be his'n, and he can do what he wants to do with it. I'm his friend, and I'm goin' to stay his friend as long as he goes on as he's goin' now, and I'm not goin' to see him bothered as long as he tends to his own business." The words fell slowly, and the weight of them rested heavily on all except on June. Her fingers loosened, and she smiled. The Red Fox rose, shaking his head. "All right, Judd Tolliver," he said warningly. "Come in and get something to eat, Red." "No," I said, "I'll be getting along." And he went, still shaking his head. The table was covered with an oilcloth spotted with drippings from a candle. The plates and cups were thick, and the spoons were of pewter. The bread was soggy, and the bacon was thick and floating in grease. The men ate, and the women served, as in ancient days. They gobbled their food like wolves, and when they drank their coffee, the noise they made was painful to June's ears. There were no napkins, and when her father pushed his chair back, he wiped his dripping mouth with the back of his sleeve. And Loretta and the stepmother, they too ate with their knives and used their fingers. Poor June quivered with a vague, new-born disgust. Ah, had she not changed in ways they could not see? June helped clear away the dishes. The old woman did not object to that. Listening to the gossip of the mountains, courtships, marriages, births, deaths, the growing hostility in the feud, the random killing of this man or that, Hale's doings in Lonesome Cove. "He's comin' over here again next Saturday," said the old woman. "Is he?" said Loretta in a way that made June turn sharply from her dishes toward her. She knew Hale was not coming, but she said nothing. The old woman was lighting her pipe. "Yes, you better be over here in your best bib and tucker." "Pshaw!" said Loretta, but June saw two bright spots come into her pretty cheeks, and she herself burned inwardly. The old woman was looking at her. "'Pears like you're mighty quiet, June." "That's so," said Loretta, looking at her too. June, still silent, turned back to her dishes. They were beginning to take notice after all, for the girl hardly knew that she had not opened her lips. Once only Dave spoke to her, and that was when Loretta said she must go. June was out in the porch looking at the already beloved garden, and hearing his step she turned. He looked her steadily in the eyes. She saw his gaze drop to the fairy stone at her throat, and a faint sneer appeared at his set mouth, a sneer for June's folly and what he thought was uppishness in the furriners like Hale. "So, you ain't good enough for him just as you are here," he said slowly. "He's got to make ye all over again, so you'll be fittin' for him." He turned away without looking to see how deep his barbed shaft went, and, startled, June flushed to her hair. In a few minutes they were gone, Dave without the exchange of another word with June, and Loretta with a parting cry that she would come back on Saturday. The old man went to the cornfield high above the cabin. The old woman, groaning with pains real and fancied, lay down on a creaking bed, and June, with Dave's wound rankling, went out with Bub to see the new doings in Lonesome Cove. The geese cackled before her, the hogfish darted like submarine arrows from rock to rock, and the willows bent in the same wistful